Hey YouTubers, Snap-on John 100 here, and I'm going to be changing spark plugs in my 2000 Hyundai Accent with a single overhead cam 1.5 liter engine. And I've got most everything lined up here. I've got various spark plug gapping tools. I've got a boot remover pliers. I am using a long 3/8 drive ratchet Snap-on, and I'm using a wobble extension and a Snap-on 7/8 spark plug socket. I'm sorry, 5/8 spark plug socket. I've got some synthetic grease, and I've got a blowgun here, and I got my spark plugs. I also looked up the specs because when you work on a lot of different things, you want to make sure you got the right specs. And the specs for this engine is, I'm using NGK plugs BKR5ES-11, and the gap is 39 to 43 thousandths of an inch. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the plugs out and gap them. Okay, to make this easier, what I did, I've got a couple different ones, and this one has thousandths on one side and millimeters. This is the thousand side. You flip it over and it's in millimeters. And so what I'm doing is I'm just bracketing it just because I have a couple of gauges here. This one is a 40 thousandths right there, and this other type right here is a Snap-on one, and this one, let's see back here, this one is 44 thousandths. Okay, and so 44 thousandths is just beyond my upper limit, and 40 thousandths is just into the lower limit. So what I'm going to do is kind of use these go no go gauge. The other style is just a ring that's machined so that it gets thinner or thicker as you go up. So you just basically put it in and slide it along to see where you... Well, you guys are smart enough to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, you just put the wire that's the right size in the gap, and it should just fit under there and have a slight drag. Okay, if you're using this side, you just put it in the small side and slide it around to where it reads, and that's the correct size. If it's a little oversized, you just take the spark plug and tap it on something hard gently, and then try it again. Okay, so that's all you have to do. So next what I'm going to do is pull all the boots off the spark plugs. Okay, now if you look, the next thing you want to do, if you look down in there, see all the crud? It's like filled with all kinds of bugs and dirt and debris. So the next thing is you take a blowgun and blow all the way around the spark plug, because you don't want that stuff falling into the cylinder. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it out, making sure that my eyes are covered, because it's going to be a lot of junk there. Okay, let's see if I can do this on camera. Okay, sorry about the noise, but anyway, so now the next step is to remove the spark plugs one at a time, and I'll do that next. Hey YouTubers, I'm back. You want to keep the spark plugs all in order. So I put them down from 1 through 4 so I can take a look at them. They don't look very good, but they didn't seem to be missing, but the gap is huge now, so they're definitely worn out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one, and I'm going to put just a tiny bit of grease on the threads so the threads stay lubricated. I'll put all of them in, and then I'll come off camera, then I'll come back. Okay, the trick for the tightening torque on these is between 15 and 20 pound-feet, which is not hardly anything. So that's why I use a long-handled ratchet to take them out. I got a lot of leverage, but then when I put them in, I choke way up here so that I don't have much turning torque. Okay, so this way I can just snug them down and then that'll be it. Okay, just with basically wrist pressure. All right, now the next step is I'm looking at the wires, and I don't know if you can see this. I'll try to zoom in on it. See that gray on the wire right in here? That's that looks like the wire's starting to go bad. So since I use OEM things like the wires, I don't go with aftermarket things like that on something like this. It's too critical. So I'm going to stop by the dealership and pick up some wires. And the reason why I was putting these spark plugs in the first place was just because I seemed to be losing some power. I didn't have any check engine lights coming on, so there wasn't any missing. But when I stopped, like I say, a drive-up window with my windows down, and as soon as I started to take off, the engine's under heavy load, and I could hear it rattling and knocking. So that's kind of a sign, bad sign. So that's why I'm changing them. Hopefully that'll help it. Okay, the last thing I do is I put a little daub of this silicone grease in there, and that acts as a dielectric, and it helps prevent corrosion and makes sure you have a good contact. So that's the last thing I do, is I just kind of daub a little in there, and just instead of trying to daub it on the spark plug, I put it right there. Okay, lastly, now you read the spark plugs. Try to zoom in on them here. The spark plug gap, I gapped them off camera because it would be easier, is just under 55. So they're way out because they've worn down. And you can see, let me see if I can pull one. Here's a, well, let's see if I can zoom in on it. Now it's hard to tell, but it's got a really badly worn tip. Okay, it's rounded. So anyway, that's probably why I had a loss of power. Can't be for sure because there's so many things going on with cars nowadays that could be other things. But your ignition system is one of the first places to check, because when you're under load, you need to have a good spark, because the more air fuel mixture in there, it's more it's a lot harder for that spark to jump across that gap. So you don't want your gap to be overly large. You want it to be right in spec. Okay, hope this was helpful, and check you later.